Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Albany Budget Committee meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Collins?
Here.
Chrisman?
Here.
Pearson? Keller?
Here.
Canopa? Here. Holden?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Summers? Kellum?
Here.
Connolly?
Here.
Kopczynski?
Here.
Coburn?
Here.
Johnson? Here. Thompson?
Thank you. So we had 3 committee members who let us know ahead of time that they wouldn't be here tonight. Is there any public comment? Okay. We'll go ahead and continue with Fire Department, please.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Chair and Budget Committee. My name is John Bradner, the Fire Chief for the Albany Fire Department. It's my pleasure to present the fiscal year 2014-15 budget for the Fire Department. I want to start off by thanking each one of you for the participation that you put into this process and the feedback that we get from you. And I also want to thank my staff and the department who puts a lot of effort into the budget process every year. And as revenues seem to get tighter, the budget process seems to get longer, and there's a lot more effort that goes into really scrutinizing every expenditure. And so I very much appreciate the staff that's here tonight, and then plenty others that aren't here that have helped with this process. So I just want to let them know how much I appreciate their help on this. You should, on the dais in front of you, have 2 handouts from me. The first one is a handout of the PowerPoint presentation that I'll be going over tonight, so you can look at that in front of you. The second one is an updated budget that needs to replace pages 260 and 261 in your budget document. Once we started taking a look at it, we realized what actually got into the book did not reflect the history of combining 2 budgets together. And so working with finance, we were able to get a document that was able to marry the two budgets, and I'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but to marry those 2 budgets together into one budget and then show a history of what expenditures are. So it's going to be a more accurate and better reflection of the costs associated with the line items in the 1208 budget. So any questions on that? I want to make sure
You said 260 and 61?
260 and 61, which is, yeah, which is, on this one it's on the back side. We duplexed it.
Oh, it's just that 260, well, my page 260 is a general fund fire with personnel services at the top. This one has general revenues for ambulance at the top.
Yes, the revenues were showing on, actually they weren't even showing up because we're combining the ambulance fund and suppression fund together. Okay. So once we combined it, this one is accurate.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'll go into my presentation. Like the other directors before me, I'm going to be following a very similar format, and I hope to be able to answer your questions as we go along, giving an overview of the fire department. I want to provide some background and some additional information about the department, and then more specifically going over the budget. So I want to start off with what the fire department does. And a lot of people know, obviously, what the fire department does. We put out fires. But what I wanted to try and do is I wanted to provide some additional information about what we do and kind of mine down a little bit to give a little bit more details to hopefully get a little bit more understanding to what we do. So we respond to fire and medical emergencies. And most of you here should know that we have 3 rural fire districts that we provide services to. So we provide service to the City of Albany and then 3 surrounding rural fire districts. And those districts make up a total of 81 square miles. I believe the City of Albany is about 18 square miles, and so we go a total of 81, including that 18. We also provide advanced life support ambulance service, and that goes to a much larger area. And that area is 205 square miles, and it goes south of Tangent, halfway between here and Corvallis, halfway between here and Lebanon, and then to the north just a little bit. So it's a much bigger area. On average right now, we're responding on 19 emergency responses every single day, and that's an increase, and I'll cover more about that here in a little bit. Typically, our mix of medical versus fire is 85-15, 85% medical, 15% fire. That's pretty typical standard throughout the nation for fire departments. Some may be 80-20, some may be 90-10, but somewhere around that 85-15 is pretty average. You may not realize we transport approximately 3,500 patients to area hospitals every year. And then in addition to the fire and medical responses that we go on, we also respond on hazardous materials calls, water and technical rescue emergencies, and then other requests for emergency service that may come up. A few other things the fire department does, and I kind of hesitated putting some stuff on there because there's so many other things that we do, but I wanted to highlight just a few things. We train our personnel. This last year we had over 70 hours of documented training. And I say documented because that's actually stuff that's structured and planned. We have firefighters that go out and do a lot of training on their own, or they'll see classes on their own, or they'll just train with a crew member and they don't actually document that. But this last year we had over 70 hours annually of documented training per firefighter. Public education is another aspect of what we do. Last year we had 362 presentations to nearly 8,000 adults and children in our community. We also do code inspections. Our compliance deputy fire marshals inspect about over 1,500 inspections annually that they conduct. And this last year they abated or corrected nearly 700 hazards in our community that they found going to businesses. Our ambulance billing staff manages approximately 2,500 fire med ambulance subscriptions, and that's for about 5,400 individuals. In addition to that, then they invoice over $4 million for ambulance services, and I'll talk more a little bit about that later as well. So our annual emergency call volume, this is a 12-year representation of how many emergencies that we've responded to over the last 12 years, just to give you a history. You can see there in the early to mid-2000s, we were on a pretty steady upward climb, every year going up by a few hundred calls. And then we reached 2007 to 2009, where we kind of stagnated at the 6,400 level. Amidst of the recession, for some reason, we dropped down to just over 6,000 calls, and we had a pretty good dip in our call volume. Came back up, and for the last 3 years, then we've been pretty steady. And then this current year that we're in, we're actually on pace to do about 430 calls more this year than we've ever done before, which is a very significant increase for us. And something we're not able to explain. A lot of times I'll have people ask me, well, why the dip here? Why the increase there? And my answer to them is always, if I could figure that out, I'd write a book and I'd probably make millions telling other people how to predict their calls. But for some reason right now our call volume is up, and it is up significantly. So how do we do it? Well, we do it through our personnel. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about was what our FTEs have done over the last about 10 years or so. And you can see on this chart here that in the mid-2000s, when our call volume was going up, our number of FTE was increasing from 76 up to 2009, where we hit our high of 80 personnel, 80 FTE. And then with the recession, we started not filling positions and if you will, scaling back, and started to take a dip over a few years there, and we reached the 73.6. And then that increase there is from the SAFER grant that we received in 2013. I think it was 2013 if I remember right. And that grant allowed us to bring on 6 new firefighter EMTs with the department. It's a federal grant, 2 years, full costs associated with wages and benefits for 6 firefighters. And then in this coming year's budget, we are not budgeting, not able to budget to continue those positions on. So we're actually looking at having our FTE drop in 2015 fiscal year down to actually our lowest that it's been at 72.4 FTE. So personnel changes, wanted to spend just a minute and kind of cover that and talk about what has happened in our department over the last 5 years. We've actually seen a reduction of 7.6 FTE. In addition, we have downgraded 2 positions from doing some different restructuring and looking at how we operate. And then consequently, we have had to upgrade 3 support positions during that time as well. What we found by scaling back and downgrading some certain positions, we had other people who were working outside their job class, and they were doing more than what they had been doing previously and what their job description allowed. So we upgraded then 3 support positions to help cover that difference. Those reductions have come in each of our divisions, the Emergency Services, Life Safety Division, and our Support Division. During the 5 years, we're down 4 firefighter EMTs, and those 4 firefighter EMTs do not include the 3 new SAFER positions. So when we went out for the SAFER grant, we were at that point in time, we were down 4 firefighters from where we'd been at our high. The SAFER grant got us back 3 of those firefighter positions, and then we got 3 new firefighter positions that the grant allowed us the funding allowed us to support. And so in addition to the 4 firefighter positions, that does not include then the 3 new positions, which we're not filling this coming year. Also in Emergency Services, we're down 1 training division chief's position, and I'll talk more about that here in a second when I get to our org chart. And in our Life Safety Division, we've reduced 2 deputy fire marshals, 1 compliance deputy fire marshal, and that's an inspector that actually goes out and does fire code inspections, and then 1 public education position. And then on the support side, an administrative assistant position is also down as well. So speaking of the org chart, here is our organizational chart for the department. Underneath me is the fire chief. Our city's emergency management specialist reports to me. I have an administrative services supervisor and an assistant chief, and then a fire marshal or division chief fire marshal. We have 1.6 FTE currently in the admin assistant that support our administrative services supervisor. And then under our assistant chief, which is Shane Wooten, who's sitting next to me, he supervises our division chief in charge of EMS, or the ambulance division, our 3 battalion chiefs that supervise the shifts, so the day-to-day operations of actually responding on calls. And there's A, B, and C, and then under each one of those there's 4 stations, so I have a lieutenant at each station. I have an apparatus operator or a driver, engineer, whatever you want to call them. We call them apparatus operators, but they're the individual who drives the engine and operates the pump. I have an apparatus operator at each of the 4 stations, and then I have 11 firefighters per shift that are divided up amongst the 4 stations. Shane also supervises or he did supervise our division chief in charge of training. That position is not continuing funding at the end of this fiscal year, and so that's a vacant position that we're not filling. And then I've got a training lieutenant underneath him, and so Shane will then be supervising that training lieutenant as well. So every year when I get up in front of you, I talk about the fact that that the fire department brings in about 30% of its budget from non-City of Albany property tax revenue. And so in doing the PowerPoint presentation this year, I was able to actually, if you will, graphically show you what I mean by that. So our budget in the current year is about $12.5 million. Total budget for the fire department about $12.5 million. We brought in last year, generated in revenue, just over $3.5 million from sources other than non-City of Albany property taxes. And that pie chart there shows a breakdown of that. You can see that roughly 50% or 49.2% of the revenue that we bring in is from ambulance service fees. When an individual calls for an ambulance and they ride an ambulance, we are going to bill their insurance company, and then there's potentially co-pays, depending on if they have fire med or not, if they have a subscription to that. But we do generate revenue from that. Last year we generated, as you can see, a little over 1.7 million. With our call volume being up this year, we're actually on pace to probably do about $80,000 more this year. So probably somewhere 1.85 or 1.84 million dollars on that, which is the good side of having an increased call volume. The second largest area where we bring revenue in is our contracts with our 3 rural fire districts. That's $1.4 million. Like I talked about at the beginning, we have the rural fire districts that we respond into their area, and we provide fire suppression and medical services and emergency response. They contract with us, and then we end up responding there. And then we last year got about $1.4 million from that. That is property tax money because they're being taxed, the individuals that live in that district, but it's not. It's non-City of Albany property tax money. So I want to make sure and be clear on that. Last year, grants and reimbursable programs, about $224,000 we brought in. Some of that was that SAFER grant, and the SAFER stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. So if you hear me refer to the SAFER, that's what it is. So a big part of this app, but we also have a handful of other smaller grants that we received from the state and federal governments. FireMed last year brought in just under $170,000, and then from other revenue, a little over $12,000. So total is $3.5 million. That's about 30% of our about $12.5 million budget. So I want to talk just a little bit about our proposed budget and give some more information about that. Probably the most significant change in our budget is the fact that, as I alluded to at the beginning, we're combining two budgets together. That's our suppression budget and our ambulance budget. Their numbers are 1201 and 1206. And we're combining those into one program, which is going to be called Fire Department Emergency Services, and that's the 1208 budget. The page that I passed out at the beginning is on your dais. That's that 1208 budget. What we were finding is that over the last few years, our revenues were decreasing, especially on the ambulance side. It was getting more difficult to be able to cover all the costs, and so we had a number of expenditures on the ambulance side that we were pulling out of the ambulance budget and we were moving into the suppression budget, just because, as you could see earlier, our call volume was relatively stagnant and our costs were going up. And so sat down with Stuart and talked about it this year and said, okay, do we need to look at a different way of more accurately accounting for how much it costs for the fire department to provide emergency services? And so the best thought was that if we combine those two together, it'll allow us to do that. It'll show it all combined together, and it won't have us transferring funds, if you will, from one budget to another budget to try and make sure that the revenues always match the expenditures in the ambulance fund. So with that, every year I come to you and I tell you that we're going to be going over, I'm going to be going over 4 budgets. This year it's just 3 budgets. The combined 1208 budget together, the 1202 budget, which is our public safety levy, that funds, so you know, 7 firefighter EMT positions and 1 deputy fire marshal. It only funds the positions, the wages and benefits, and then the central service charges that are associated with that. It doesn't fund any operating costs for those positions at all. There's no, because of compression, there's no funding for training or equipment or anything along those lines. So it's just the positions that are funded out of there. And then our 1203 budget, which is the Fire and Life Safety Services, that funds our fire marshal and 2 deputy fire marshal positions, and then the operational costs associated with those positions. So the fire department's total budget that is being proposed is $12,822,600. That's just under a 3% increase. And then it's broken down there into personnel costs and materials and services, and you can see that's about, if I remember right, about an 82-83% split, 17-18, somewhere around there, between personnel costs and materials and services. And then a breakdown by the program. The 1208 Fire Emergency Services budget is just over $11 million, and that's just over a 5% increase. Public safety levy is a little over $1 million. That's a 3% increase. And the Fire and Life Safety budget is just under $700,000. That's actually a 22% decrease. And the reason why it's a decrease is that we're not funding a position. It's a smaller budget. There's fewer positions in there. So when you take one position out, obviously the impact is going to be pretty significant. But overall increase in this year's budget of 2.94%. So a few highlights of the budget to go over. The first one is overtime. We're increasing the overall overtime budget of $85,000 due to increase in the call volume and then decrease in the emergency response personnel. We have minimum staffing that we have to maintain at our stations, and to ensure that we've got adequate resources and adequate personnel to respond to emergencies. And what we're finding is with less personnel and more calls, it takes more people to be able to fill in and cover overtime shifts when needed. So we're have an overall increase in the overtime budget. You'll notice in 1208's licensing and accreditation fee, I believe the increase is about 3,300%, if I remember right. That increase is for EMT recertification. Every other year it goes up. We're on a 2-year cycle in the state for EMT recertification. And so every other year it goes up significantly, and then the opposite year it goes down. I think we believe a couple $100 in there, but then it shows up as it does in this year as a significant increase. But that's EMT recertification that we provide to all of our EMTs in our department. Uniforms, uniform budget went up. We're purchasing new winter coats, if you will, rain jackets for our personnel. Our current jackets we've had for a number of years, and they're not holding the water out, and they're not keeping them protected as they're out on calls. These are not the turnout coats, they're protective coats. These are just the rain coats, if you will, that they're wearing on the 85% of the medical calls and other types of calls that they're going on. So we've increased that budget to cover that expense in this coming year. Insurance and bonds had an overall increase of $12,000 or 18.9%. And that's, as I understand it, due to experience and just increased insurance rates. And that's a fixed cost that we get from finance every year. And if you have questions on that, Stuart may be able to answer that more clearly. But that was just a significant increase that I wanted to highlight. Capital equipment have an increase in that. I think it's $27,000 in capital equipment. And just to define that a little further, we're buying a new rescue tool. And a rescue tool is commonly known as the Jaws of Life, if you will. Jaws of Life is a brand name, so it's not specifically the Jaws of Life. We actually use a different brand, but that's a rescue tool, and we're replacing one of those this year. We have 2 thermal imaging cameras that are out of service, and so we're replacing one of those in this coming budget year. Thermal imaging camera is what allows us to be able to see through the smoke and be able to tell if there's a person inside a room or a structure when it's on fire or when it's filled with smoke. And then we're also replacing some fitness equipment that's covered under that capital equipment as well. I wanted to cover for just a couple minutes some department challenges and talk about those. Probably our biggest challenge is providing consistent, adequate emergency services staffing. With the safer staffing that we were able to put on, we actually were able as a department to increase our minimum staffing, and I referred to that before. Each station has a set number of people that every day have to be on duty at that station. If something happens, vacation, sick leave, bereavement leave, different things like that, we then call somebody back to fill in that position. So each station has a minimum staffing level. Our North Albany station, Station 14, prior to getting the SAFER grant, had a minimum staffing level of 3. And so typically every day we would have 3 firefighters assigned to the North Albany station, and they would staff a swing crew. So if a fire call came in, the 3 would hop on the fire engine and they would go on that call. If a medical call came in, the 3 would hop on the ambulance and they would take the medical call. And you might have a question of, well, how come you didn't leave one person back? Because typically on a medic unit we only have 2 people. That one person back isn't of much use. If they were to go on a fire, they wouldn't be able to do much. There's a safety measure that wouldn't exist as far as having adequate personnel to be able to conduct a rescue or do different things like that. So the 3 individuals before the SAFER grant responded on either a medic or an engine call, depending on what the call was, leaving that station then without any coverage at all. When we got the SAFER staffing, part of that obviously was to increase our staffing. Like I said, we got 3 additional people. So with that, we put a 4th person at the North Albany station. What that allowed us to do is to increase our staffing on the engine. So we went from a 3-person engine to a 4-person engine, which has a lot of ramifications for us. By OSHA rules, we have to have 4 people on scene of a structure fire before we can take an offensive attack on that fire. When that station only has 3 people at it, they're waiting for another station to arrive before they're making an interior attack into that fire. By having 4 people at that station allows them to take action immediately upon arrival of that crew for a fire call in their area. So we would either staff a 4-person engine company or 2 2-person medic units. We put an extra medic unit out there and said, okay, if a medical call comes in, 2 of you take the medic unit and respond on that. The other 2 stay back and take the 2nd medic unit. And what we were finding is that there was more and more times that that 2nd medic unit was responding on calls, and it was providing better coverage not only to the citizens of North Albany, but also to the entire community, because we weren't having to call mutual aid as often and wait for a resource to show up from another district. So we did that for exactly about a year. I think it was about a year's period of time. We increased our staffing up from 17 to 18, and then we started losing some positions, and we weren't didn't have the funding to replace them. And so here, about I think it was 3 months ago, it was February, I believe. I think it was about February or so. We dropped the staffing level back from 18 to 17, and we went back to the way that it was of a 3-person swing on either an engine or a medic unit. So it's a challenge for us to make sure that we can have consistent, adequate emergency services staffing, and that's one of the things I wanted to refer to there on that. Of those safer positions, 5 of them, the grant actually runs out in October, so it'll go about 3 months or so into this coming fiscal year. But then at that point in time, the funding will not continue. We'll have the ability to apply for another grant. That, as I've been told by by FEMA, that grant application period will probably be sometime around September, October, and our intentions will be to apply for another grant and see what we can do with that. But of the 6 safer positions, 5 of them are currently vacant. People have retired, left over the last few months. And one of them is actually a filled firefighter's position that at this point in time is not going to continue throughout this coming entire budget year. So that's an issue for us. Second issue there is addressing community hazards and risk reduction with reduced life safety division staff. Less people to be able to go out and provide public education, to provide public information, and also to do compliance inspections has an impact on the community and on the department. And I've covered some of this already, but impacts of decreased staffing, I already talked about the fact that we're not staffing what we were when we had the safer staffing. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that because of our increased call volume, the other 2 staffed medic units, staff full-time medic units, which are stations 12 and stations 13, or medic 12 and medic 13, there we're seeing a significant amount of that increase, the 430 calls this year. So we've actually switched it to where station 14 in North Albany is now handling all of our out-of-town transfers. We respond on about 400 out-of-town transfers, and that could be to Corvallis or to Portland or to Eugene typically, or Salem, any one of those areas. But currently the North Albany station is the station that is responding to Albany General, picking up the patient, and then taking them to an out-of-the-area hospital. That then puts us in situations where we don't have coverage at that station during that time, which we did when we had the safer staffing at that higher level. Impacts of decreased staffing, like I mentioned earlier, is increased reliance on mutual aid. When we respond on emergency calls, approximately 10% of the time there's 3 or more emergencies going on at the same time. So I'm not saying all the time we've got 3 or more emergencies, but of the times that we're responding on calls, about 10% of that time there's 3 calls going on at the same time. So what that means is that's multiple units from multiple stations that are tied up, and a greater potential for us to have to call Lebanon or Corvallis or Tangent, depending on what it is, or another area department to come in and to cover our calls. And then as I said, the reduced inspections and public education opportunities. Hazards are not being identified and addressed, and inability to share public education and public information with the citizens of our community. Had some conversation at the last budget meeting about our equipment replacement, and so I wanted to provide some additional information about our equipment replacement schedule and just some more information about that. So as a department, we've established a number of years ago our equipment replacement schedule, how often we should be replacing our equipment. This is based on different standards, national fire protection standards that are out there, best practices, different items such as that, recommendations from the manufacturer and whatnot. But just to kind of go down that list, our fire engines and our aerial trucks we respond them 15 years in a frontline status and 10 years in a reserve status. Frontline status means every day. They're going on calls. That minimum staffing is on that piece of equipment. Unless it's out of service for maintenance or something like that, for 15 years, that engine or that truck company is responding on calls every single day. And then once we get to the point of 15 years, we put it into reserve status for another 10 years. And then at the end of 25 years, the objective is to replace that, and to get a new vehicle to start that cycle all over again. Our water tenders, our brush units, and our rescues, 25 years in reserve. We don't staff those in a frontline basis, and so they last 25 years in a reserve status. Our ambulances, 10 years in frontline. Our emergency command vehicle, or our battalion chief's vehicle, is 8 years frontline status. That vehicle goes on a lot of calls and gets a lot of hard miles on it, and so our goal is to replace that every 8 years. Staff vehicles that the deputy fire marshals drive and our day staff emergency responders, approximately every 12 to 15 years. That depends on wear and tear and usage and recommendations from our fleet maintenance staff over at Benton County. Our heart monitors and defibrillators, we replace those every 7 years. There's a lot of technology that goes into a heart monitor and a defibrillator, and so trying to keep up with the technology and to make sure that we're providing the most up-to-date medical care that we can on cardiac patients. We replace those every 7 years. Our self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBAs, those are the air tanks we wear on our backs when we go into a smoky situation, every 15 years. And then our personal protective equipment, or our firefighter turnouts, you might hear us call us turnouts. In the picture there, you can see the firefighters wearing their turnouts. They're kind of a tan-colored pants and suit, if you will, outfit, and then they have their SCBAs on their back. Those we're currently on an every 6-year frontline, 6-year reserve replacement schedule on that. And I'll talk just a little bit more about that here in just a couple minutes. I realize there's a lot of information on this chart, but I felt it was some pertinent information and good, valuable information to show you a history of our equipment replacement funds over the last 11, 12 years or so. The first column is the fiscal year. The second column is how much money that the city has funded toward equipment replacement each one of those years. I think Mayor Canopa last week talked about the fact that when we passed the public safety levy, one of the things that we passed it saying was that we were going to put money toward equipment replacement for the fire department. And that was correct. We started off putting $200,000 a year toward equipment replacement, and I actually got to the point in 2007, 8, and 8, 9 for 2 years where we were able to up that to $275,000 that we put. And then 2009, 10, budget started getting tighter, had to make choices between funding personnel and funding equipment. And so that year we were able to put $50,000 into equipment replacement. And then since that year, the last 4 years and this current year, which the coming year, which doesn't show on there, we have not put any city dollars toward equipment replacement for 5 years then. The next column there shows expended, how much money each of those years we've expended out of the equipment replacement fund. And you can see the dollar amounts in each one of those years. And then the fourth column is the fire district donation. The fire districts have supported us over the years with providing funding toward specific purchases. And you can see the dollar amounts, and I'll highlight the one there at the bottom of that chart, $475,000 that Albany Rural put toward the truck company, which we just purchased. And the total cost of that truck company, $851,930. So they put in a significant portion of the money toward that truck company, which was greatly appreciated. And then the final column is what has been purchased in each one of those years, just to try and define that a little bit further. So status of our equipment replacement funds. Currently, I believe that I've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about $50,000 left in equipment replacement. We're having to pay for some equipment to go on to the new truck company. They don't come fully equipped. So we're paying for some equipment to go on the new truck company. I've been told that's probably going to be $15,000 to $20,000, somewhere around there. So with that, that's going to leave me about $30,000. I've got a staff vehicle that I actually budgeted to replace this year that I'm trying to see if that's still a possibility or not. But in essence, at the end of this fiscal year, those funds will basically be non-existent. So in this coming year, and I think Wes or Stewart might have talked about this earlier, we're requesting funds to remount one medic unit. So there's $200,000 to go to the fire department, and we want to use that to remount a medic unit. And what that is that we can go out and buy a brand new medic unit, and I believe the costs that we've heard for that are somewhere around $250,000, $275,000, something like that. Or we can remount the medic unit, and we can take the box off, and we can put it on a new chassis. And so it's got a brand new 2015, if you will, I guess, chassis, but it just reuses the old box that was on there. We've been told we could probably do that for around $200,000, and so our goal in this budget would be able to remount one medic unit for $200,000 out of this coming year's budget. We have an unfunded need currently, and that's for a brush engine. And the brush engine, the picture to the right of the white pickup truck, that's what we call a Type 6 engine. It's a four-wheel drive vehicle that has a smaller tank, typically around 250 gallons of water, has a smaller pump on it. It is more maneuverable. It's easier to get off-road, easier to get into areas like Knox Butte, North Albany. If we've got some type of a wildland fire, wildland urban interface, we're able to get closer to the fire potentially with that type of engine. We do have an unfunded need currently to replace that. Our current truck company, which is pictured in the bottom right-hand corner there, with us getting a new truck company, we're actually putting that one up for sale. And we hope to get enough revenue from that to be able to purchase a Type 6 engine to meet that unfunded need in this current year. Like selling any used vehicle, we don't know how much money we'll get for that. So we'll have to wait and see if we get enough, but that would be the goal, that we would do that in this coming year and replace that truck company with a brush engine. I talked earlier about our firefighter PPE. Wanted to mention that we've actually extended the life expectancy of some different things, one being the firefighter PPE. We actually, originally we were on a 5-year schedule, and that kept with NFPA standards of having a full replacement of your turnouts every 10 years, frontline and backup. We've been doing a lot more preventative maintenance over the last probably 3 or 4 years or so on the turnouts, and so we believe we can get a little bit more life out of them and save a little bit more money. And so we've extended that life expectancy on the PPE, the turnouts that the firefighters wear, at this point in time from 5 years to 6 years. We have a rescue vehicle and a water tender that are actually due to be replaced. They're at that 25-year time span. We're extending the life of those for a little bit longer. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, we have staff vehicles that have exceeded our desired equipment replacement schedule. And so we're keeping those longer as well. Pending needs, not in this coming fiscal year, but in the following or the next couple of fiscal years. We have 3 medic units that are going to need to be remounted or replaced in some way. They're reaching the end of their useful lifespan, and so that's something that's coming up. Our heart monitors, defibrillators, they're coming close to that 7 years. I believe I know it's not this coming budget year, but I believe it's the following year also we'll be looking at replacing those. And then I just wanted to mention IT equipment replacement. Have not and are not in this budget putting any money toward IT equipment replacement. Had conversations with IT staff about that. We're okay right now with the upgrade to Windows 8.1. We replaced all of our computers within the last probably year. And so they should last a while longer, but my concern is that with not putting any money aside, at some point in time that's going to come back to bite us with the IT equipment, and we're going to need to replace that in the future. The final challenge is replacing the downtown fire station. Been talking about that a lot. Probably you've heard me talk about that every budget as I've come up here. I'm pleased to say that we've got a public safety facilities review committee that's diligently evaluating that, and steps are taken forward, but that is a challenge for our department as that fire station now is 64 years old, or actually going on 65 years. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the Albany Fire Department.
Right.
Just 2 relatively quick ones. On page 4 of your PowerPoint, you show the non-city of Albany property tax revenues, and it shows the rural fire districts. Does that also possibly include the, I call it like in lieu of the funding for that fire district donation for the truck fund?
No.
That is not.
That's above and beyond.
That's fine.
Above and beyond.
One other question, you started to address the 60211 insurance and bonds, how it jumped up dramatically. I don't see that line item in the other two budgets, but I guess the biggest question I have is, I think we took pride in you announcing that we had maintained our insurance rating and everything else, so you mentioned that the insurance rates had gone up then.
So
that would keep them down by having that rating?
Yeah, this is not the ISO rating or the insurance rates that the community pays for fire protection. This is our department's rate that we pay for insurance. I don't know, Stuart, if you want to explain that any further?
The insurance costs, our insurance costs did go up a little bit. Citywide premiums did go up, but there's the way they're distributed among the departments is based on claims history and size of operating budget. And in the case of fire department, we have, Mike's whispering in my ear, 2 personnel claims and a couple property claims in the fire department that largely can be attributed, or the increase can largely be attributed to the history of the last 5 years.
And that amount is in each of the 3 budgets. There is a line item for insurance and bonds. I believe in 2 of the budgets, 1202 and 1208, it actually went down. In 1203, I believe, was the budget where it went up.
The aggregate was considerably less. I mean, it jumped up dramatically for the overall.
Overall, correct.
Your breathing apparatus, you said replacement every 7 years?
Every 15 on the full SCBA. The bottles, I believe, have a 10-year life expectancy, I think.
They have a 10-year until you have to hydrotest them.
Yeah.
But you can hydrotest them cheap, comparatively.
Right.
And I presume that you do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Is there a relationship between how much people, when they get fire med, pay to the amount of cost that we expend in giving them that service?
Well, we do track, and I'm not sure if this will answer your question or not, but we do track how much money that we write off for fire med patients or individuals that have fire med. A couple years ago, I came to the council because we were getting to the point that our amount of write-offs was going to exceed the amount of money that we were getting in revenue, and therefore the program really doesn't make sense unless we make some changes. We chose to increase our rate of fire, the rate that they pay from $50 to $65, and actually in this last year, see if I can find that real quickly. In this last year, like I said, we were about $170,000 in revenue that we got in from fire med subscriptions, and our write-offs were, looks like just under $90,000.
So the ratio that you have with that, so we're, quote, kind of making a profit.
Kind of.
At least we're not expending anything extra.
Correct.
With Joe Schwartz, who has a problem out in the street, when we charge them, that ratio is substantially different. Is that not correct?
When they have a problem in the street.
And just someone who does not have fire med.
Oh, well, they're going to get charged. I mean, they're going to get charged the whole amount. With fire med, the only thing that happens with fire med is that if you have a subscription to fire med, we will bill your insurance company. So if your insurance company pays 80%, great, we could then collect 80% on that. What we will not do is we will not go after you for the other 20%. So you've prepaid that up front, if you will, by getting your fire med subscription. If you're an individual that doesn't have any insurance at all, that $65 that we got covers the entire ambulance bill. So we're going to charge everybody the same amount. It's just that if you have fire med, we're not going to seek to collect the funds, the additional funds, if you will, the copay or the other funds.
Okay. And finally, have you researched, or do you know how much it costs to take the fire truck to the ambulance call versus, in total, versus how much it would cost to hire an extra person so that you didn't have to take the truck?
An extra person and put them on the ambulance?
They don't take,
One or the other, yeah.
you send all three in the ambulance if only an ambulance is needed. You don't send the fire truck from North Albany.
Well, it depends on the call. It depends on the
Right.
type of call. And
Yeah, I
I
read
think
the
actually,
handout. Are you talking about the North Albany station?
No, I'm talking about generally.
yeah. And we've not sat down and figured out that dollar amount for how much it costs and compared it to a personnel.
I think that would be a fine compilation to do, computation to do, excuse me. I mean, if you're going to have your machines using diesel and tires, et cetera, that amount of money is no small amount of money. It just depends how much it happens and how much the extra person would cost.
Right. And yet, you bring up a good question, and it's a question we receive quite a bit, and that's, I called for an ambulance, why did an engine show up? I didn't want an engine, I wasn't on fire, how come?
I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the relationship between the two, there might be some place you could save some money.
Sure. Yeah, we can take a look at that.
That's all I have.
How often does an engine get redispatched from responding to an accident, to a new emergency, a new fire?
I
Yeah.
don't think we really track that, or able to come up with that number.
It does occur. With 10% of the time, us having, when we have calls, we've got 3 calls going on at the same time. It's not infrequent that we're breaking one unit away. We've got a medical call, and they've got an engine and ambulance there. Okay, engine, are you available? Yeah, okay, we need you and this other medic unit to go because you're closer. So it's not an infrequent thing that occurs. It does happen on a daily basis, I'm sure.
I was looking at your overtime in 1208. It's increasing 100,000, up to $500,000 in overtime. Have you analyzed how that overtime is dispersed across the department and done the calculation for the trade-off for a full FTE versus the responding overtime?
We have, to a degree, and the $100,000 increase in there is, like I said, it was $85,000, so it's offset. We had some other ones that we lowered. So we have done some looking at that. Probably the biggest area where we looked at that was when we had the increased staffing. What did it do for our overtime budget? We projected that it would actually lower it more significantly than it did. And so the savings wasn't as much as we thought it would be with having 3 additional people on. We haven't done a real detailed analysis of that, but an initial analysis, we're not at a point where that savings, we believe, would generate enough money to hire positions, at least enough positions.
I would think that, the 485 total, you'd never be able to do away with it by having FTEs simply because the way that this is dispersed throughout the department.
Right.
But it might be that part of that 485,000 could fund 2 FTEs, and you designate them as floaters.
Yeah.
And my experience is I've actually called people floaters,
Mm-hmm.
and you assign them to different stations on different shifts, and they know when they take that job that they have the risk of having their hours shifted on a routine basis. But we did it because it reduced the total costs between FTEs plus overtime.
Right. That's a good point.
Bill?
So I want to talk about this SAFER grant. As I understood it, it allowed you to hire 6 people.
Correct.
But I also heard you say that 5 of those positions are vacant?
They're not, 3 of those positions are vacant today. By the end of the month, 2 more will be vacant. I've got one individual that is leaving to become the chief of Sweet Homes Fire Department, and then I've got another individual that's retiring the end of the month. And so currently I have 3 vacancies, and like I said, at the end of the month I'll have 2 more vacancies.
So is it your intent to fill those positions? Now, I understand the money goes away in October unless the grant is renewed. I mean, if I'm looking at your grant application, I'm thinking you didn't even use all the money we gave you.
Yeah.
You didn't even keep all those people fully employed.
So we applied to FEMA for a waiver, and that was one of the things that was part of the process, is that if you weren't able to continue to fund these positions, one of their caveats was that it couldn't just affect the fire department, but it had to affect all emergency services at that jurisdiction, so law enforcement and the fire department. And they also had positions that have gone unfilled within the last year. So as long as it affected equally all emergency services within a jurisdiction, we were available for a waiver. We applied for that. We received a waiver for 2 of the 3 positions that are currently vacant. The other positions were within 6 months, and what they've told us is that once you get within 6 months of the end, they're not going to make you fill a position because it's going to take you 2 to 3 months to do a recruitment process and then bring somebody on, and then we put them through about a 2-month recruit academy, so that by the time we get them to where they're actually able to function, they've got maybe a week or 2 of work before the grant ends.
Do you have to return money?
Possibly. We're going to request an extension to be able to hopefully use the money, but our latest information from them is that we probably won't be able to have that extension, and there'll probably be money left on the table, and that's their call, if you will.
So is that part of your budget to return money in that safer grant budget?
Yeah, it's a reimbursement. So we don't actually return the money. It's just that every quarter we expend the money, we put it out for wages and benefits, and then we seek reimbursement.
Okay, I understand that then. And just for my own curiosity, you were mentioning the scenario at Station 14 with a 3-person crew, and I understand how a 4-person crew works. Is a 3-person crew really a viable option, or is it better to just go from 4 down to 2?
Well, if you go from 4 to 2, all I can staff at that station is just a medic unit.
Oh, you can't send 2 out?
No.
On an engine company? Okay.
Each engine has an apparatus operator who drives it, operates the pump, has a lieutenant, company officer who's in charge and, if you will, giving orders to his crew, and here's what we're going to do, and overseeing the operations, if you will, and then 1 firefighter assigned.
No, that answers the question. Yeah. Thank you.
And with the new E-plans process that the city's instituted, when your engines respond to the fire, can you pull up building plans?
Currently, no. At some point in time in the future, we hope to. We may be able to get to that, but at this point in time, we're not fully integrated into that aspect of it, but it is something that we have looked at.
So you would need additional equipment per responding vehicle to do that?
Yeah,
or your equipment can be reprogrammed?
I believe that it can be reprogrammed.
That would be my guess. We have the tablets currently on the apparatus are relatively new. I would think it would have the ability to be able to display that information. And with our crack staff of IT people, I'm sure they could make it happen.
Which draws a smile from the IT people.
Mm-hmm. But do you have the same listing? Do you have access to the inventory for hazmat storage? So when an engine responds to a location, you know if it's registered and has what type of hazardous materials on site?
So there is an HSIS program, discs that are available, and that information can be accessible to the crews that are responding as well. And that comes from State Fire Marshal's office.
Jeff?
Chief, the funding to remount the medic unit, I think you said it was $200,000 approximately. Is that reflected in your budget somewhere?
No, it is not.
It's not.
I'd have to defer to see where that money is reflected in.
There's a capital projects budget in 217, and it's under finance tab.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Next department is Parks and Recreation.
All right, I'm searching. I got to wait, find it here. That's it. Are we all ready? Okay. Good evening. Ed Hodney, Director of Parks and Recreation, presenting the proposed Parks and Recreation budget for the next fiscal year. What you'll see on the screen simply duplicates the information that you should have received a couple of weeks ago. However, I'll add some editorial comment as we go along. Mary, is the mic on? Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I can't tell from here. I do have backing me up about 1/5 of the Parks and Recreation Department. We have 5 of them back there, so that's what it takes to back me up. Some of you would attest to that. So, without further ado, I think it's important to just reflect on what our mission is. This is the mission that we've self-described, and that essentially is to be good stewards of the things that we are charged of taking care of, parks and public facilities, and also to promote healthy living through recreational, and I would add to that, educational and cultural experiences and opportunities. As you see further in the presentation, we have a larger scope of services than simply recreational services. So, those services are in several different categories. These somewhat reflect the program budgets, but they cross lines also. As I suggested earlier, we manage property and we maintain property. That property consists of several different elements, 36 parks and natural areas, a total of 895 acres, 9 miles of trail. We also care for the city's landscaping in street medians. You may or may not be aware of that. And then one thing that I think probably most of you are not aware of, the Parks and Recreation Department just assumed the responsibility for taking care of the streetscape once it was constructed. That wasn't a budget shift. It just wasn't budgeted anywhere, so we took it upon ourselves to take care of that streetscape. Part of the properties we manage are in the form of trees. We've got in excess of 14,000 public trees that we take care of throughout the year. Most of the 14,000 that we're counting here are within street rights of way. Honestly, I don't know how many trees we have in our parks because we don't count each and every one of them, but we have more than 14,000 total. One area that we are particularly proud of, and I think that many of you are also, and that is our award-winning festivals and programs. Northwest Art and Air certainly is our flagship. Your River Rhythms now will be celebrating, Katie, how many? 30 years? 31 years. That predates me, by the way, just in case you're wondering. Those are, I think, quite valuable to the community, and that value is reflected in the fact that we attract in excess of 105,000 visitors to Northwest Art and Air and the events in Monteith Park. Each year. Also reflected in terms of value is the economic impact of Northwest Art and Air alone, which by survey is estimated with direct expenditures at about $4 million every time we hold that event. That value is, again, provided us by the people that we survey out there. So those aren't numbers that we make up. If they're made up, they made them up. But they're direct expenditures. We don't apply a multiplier effect to that. And again, based on survey information. As alluded to, we do recreational, educational, arts, and cultural activities as well. I'm not going to read over each of those. I think most of you are aware of the facilities we have. Building maintenance is one that you may or may not know we are responsible for. This year, we're up to 19 city buildings and their grounds that we take care of with our building maintenance division, and that's about 291,000 square feet. And we'll talk budget in just a little bit in terms of expenditures. Aquatics and sports. You know the pools, indoors and outdoors. I think the point that I really want to highlight, again, is that economic impact. I've got to flip to my summary page here. Rob tells me that we average about 8 swim meets a year that actually draw people to stay in our community and spend money in our community over more than one night. And those are significant impacts on the economy of the community. Our 15 softball tournaments a year, again, are multi-day tournaments or events. They put heads in beds. I think the hoteliers have recently told you that they value parks and recreation events and programs, and so I would just remind you of that. About $2 million a year from swim meets and sports tournaments. Again, those are direct expenditures with no multiplier effect. We don't believe in the multiplier effect. City Hall reception and customer service, we handle that as well. We don't do utility billing, but when people come to the first floor seeking one of you or seeking the city manager's office or other offices, they typically come to us first if they're not over in utility billing already. And we answer the phones for City Hall as well. One area you may not even know about is our foster grandparent program, and that's in the grant fund, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But I noted for you the purpose of that. It's a 3-year federally funded grant, which covers all the expenses for, essentially for delivery. I don't remember how many grandparents are involved. The number is increasing, but it's the value in terms of the experience that the grandparents get, and it's the value in terms of the experience that the youth, the at-risk youth in particular, derive from a one-on-one with one of our grandparent volunteers. And we conduct those services in several different facilities owned by others around town. If you'd like to know more about that, we can certainly chat with you at some point. Other services or service areas, community garden. That was one that we got into at the initiative of the neighborhood surrounding the Willamette area neighborhood. I can't remember what the name of it is. We provide staff support for 4 commissions. Your handout from 2 weeks ago says 3. I forgot one. So this is a hot off the press update. I added the Senior Center Endowment, which is a council-appointed commission as well. Highlight for you the Sawing for Schools program. You've seen a lot of press recently about that program. The schools find it extremely valuable. We're actually working with Crescent Valley and Corvallis this year. The program, as well as the Albany schools, it's gained attention nationally for Albany, and the interest in the program is growing and growing by leaps and bounds, to the point where we're getting really close to the maximum level we can resource the program, and we're going to be looking for others to participate with us. 6 years in that program, we've contributed 29,000 board feet of lumber to the schools at this point. That's a big number. And this is quality timber also. And the schools very much appreciate it. So, you know, to do all these things with the 26 staff members that we have, 26 FTE, requires a lot of help, and we get a lot of help from this community. We have 90 or more businesses. I think it actually is pressing 100 this year, and nonprofits that work with us to deliver services. Those partnerships may take the form of gifts of cash or in-kind services that just have value as much as cash. Probably the highlight for me is the 37,000 hours of volunteers, which is approximately 18 FTE. Remember, I just told you we had 26 FTE in the department's budget. Another 18 FTE are there in the form of volunteers contributing hours every year to us, and that number continues to rise. 26 FTE in Fund 202, and I'm going to focus the rest of this presentation on Fund 202, and it'll become apparent the reason in just a moment. That's about half an FTE per 1,000 residents. I'm going to tell you repeatedly that we're good at what we do, we're efficient and effective. This is an indicator, if nothing else, in comparison with our peer groups, it's significantly below our peer group average nationally. Even more significant is the number below that. almost $11 in donations, cash donations we solicit and gain each year per capita, every man, woman, and child, compared to our peer group average nationally of 75 cents. I'm pretty darn proud of that, and our guys work year-round very hard to get there. This is really, really eye-opening to me every time I see it, and I know it already, and that is that 2/3 of all the work that's performed in the Parks and Recreation Department's programs is performed by contractors, volunteers, jail work crews, and I don't know if there's another form of laborer out there that we're not paying for, but these are non-paid staff members. Obviously, jail crews, we have to pay something for, but I guess my point here is that we haven't hired and paid wages and benefits to FTE to get this work done. For the most part, it's performed by others. And again, those others are coordinated by the folks that we have left in the Parks and Recreation Department. You know, generally our customers are pretty darn satisfied with what we do, so I won't belabor that point. I think you know it, but the most recent online survey, 2014, provides some pretty good support numbers for us there. And we do exit poll surveys as well, exit polls, and generally very satisfied to very satisfied with the programs and services. The experience is good for the people that participate. One of my staff members suggested that I needed to highlight the fact that this graph means nothing. It's just simply an illustrative graph. So just in case you were curious, it means absolutely nothing. It's a placeholder. This stuff means something. Honestly, I didn't think about that when I put it on there. There are two of them in there, by the way. We manage expenses as best we can. Since 2011, 8 FTE have been eliminated from our budgets, going from 34 to 26 FTE currently, and that's what we're proposing for the upcoming fiscal year. Importantly, that's an annualized savings of about $750,000. That number probably is higher, but that's the last calculation that I made. We take advantage with every retirement, and we've had 3 retirements recently. With every retirement or every vacant position, we look at the position, we look at today's needs, we determine if there's a better way to use that position. Just recently, we downclassed, reclassified downward into a field position, a manager position that was vacated a year ago, and that we've held vacant for most of this fiscal year. So we look for opportunities to reduce our operating expenses without sacrificing services. We have not sacrificed services to this point. The other fact of note here is that only 39% of Fund 202 is actually personnel. That's quite low compared to what you'll see in other budgets, and there are reasons for that. But remember, I said that 2/3 of the work that we get done is actually performed by people doing it for us rather than our employees directly. That's reflected, at least in part, by that number. Here's another illustrative graph. It means nothing, no numbers attached. All right, so the budget itself. The structure is in 3 funds and 13 programs, and we'll touch base on those programs in just a moment. Fund 202 is the biggest. We have 11 programs in Fund 202. Those programs are made up of what we call operating programs and then also self-supporting or self-sustaining programs, and we'll differentiate those in just a moment. Fund 203 is the grants fund, as you well know. The only grant we have in there that's alive still is the foster grandparenting program, and we just talked about that briefly. Whenever we get a capital project grant, it goes in Fund 202, or an operating grant like the foster grandparent program. It'll go in 203. Finally, central services is Fund 701. That's where you find building maintenance. I know in the budget documents you have, there is a building maintenance page. The fund is 701, central services, and that's managed by finance. So we start with revenues. I don't think I've mentioned that the Parks and Recreation Fund, Fund 202, is what's noted as a special revenue fund. And I think all of you probably are aware of this, but it bears repeating for anyone watching, that a special revenue fund simply means that money comes in, and any money that's generated within the fund stays in the fund from year to year. So that means that there's typically a year-end unspent balance, or there are some additional revenues realized over budgeted revenues during the course of the year. That money is packaged and it goes forward into the next fiscal year as a beginning balance. And that's important to note. This chart reflects the breakout in terms of percentages of what comprise our revenue streams. We have actually, these are the categories, we have 47 revenue accounts that we track and that we try to fill. Those 47 accounts are bundled as you see on the screen there. I mentioned earlier that Fund 202 expenditures within the 11 programs in this fund include operating programs and self-supporting programs. The total proposed budget for next year in Fund 202 is $7.66 million. Just to mention first about the self-supporting funds, that's Park SDCs, that's program 1500, 1507, which is the Parks Capital or CIP program, and then finally the Senior Center Foundation is 1418. Self-sustaining in that they generate all the revenue that those programs require, and so just something worth mentioning as we look at next year's budget. The self-supporting budgets go up significantly next year, about 69% over what was budgeted this year. All of that increase is in the Park SDC reserves account. It's a reserve account is an expenditure line, but it's not allocated to projects. It's not allocated to any other expenditure line. It's just held in the bank for future years. But we're able to build a reserve this year because SDC revenue is up, because building activity is up. And then back to operating programs. We'll detail those in just a moment. But I wanted you to note that only $110,000 increase is projected for the next fiscal year in our operating programs. That's a 1.7% increase over the current budget. 80,000 plus is in personnel, wages, and benefits, which we are contractually obligated to pay. Only 30,000 of it is in materials and services. Most of that is in contracts. And so that's the difference in the budgets between this year and next year. The operating program expenditures, each one of the slices of pie represents one of those 11 programs that I mentioned that are in Fund 202. A couple of notes here. The park maintenance program is the largest. You would, I think, expect it to be the largest. Lots of property to take care of. Administration, I think, catches your eye. It's 28%, which is bigger than all of the others. The reason administration is so big is because this is where we hold expenses that accrue to the entire department. Central service charges are all put into administration for all the programs. IT charges, computers, telephones, everything is put in administration. Also in administration is debt service payments on what's left of the loan for the Cool Pool, which was a 2004-2005 loan. And we're paying about $180,000 a year on that debt service. Also, Bessie, I wanted to highlight this one for you. Administration also includes the expenditures, the city's contribution to the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and CAPS, the before and after school program. The money is moved from the general fund over to Parks and Recreation, and then I manage those relationships with those three groups. You had asked a question a couple of weeks ago, I think, when we were reviewing the minutes, about what the rest of the $187,000 that's transferred from the general fund to Parks represents, since only 101 or 102 of that is going to outside agencies. The balance is money that comes from the general fund and has for as long as I've been here, to support the urban forestry program, which has now been absorbed into the park maintenance program. So that's the balance. It doesn't go for anything else other than sustaining the city's contribution to the urban forestry program.
So that isn't actually shown anywhere. I mean, there's no.
Yeah, there's not a line item. Well, I'm going to have to ask Rick or Gary, is there a line item related to those revenues? I don't think there is, Bessie.
Because I'm wondering if it would be better, instead of having it, the full amount, just only doing the 3 outside agencies.
Just separating those and showing
Yeah,
those
I
as
think so.
2 different transfers instead?
I think that might be, that way it would
Yeah,
kind of balance out.
that certainly answers the question, so we can do that from this
Sounds
point
great.
forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
But I just wanted to make sure that we address that tonight.
Great, thanks.
All right. Issues and challenges. I'm just going to keep it to 3. You are aware, if you've been sitting in on our capital improvement program reviews over the last few years, that the parks CIP in particular gets smaller and smaller. It's all due to resources. We have a 2006 park master plan that we have partially accomplished, but a couple of years ago I just decided I was going to recommend that we just simply cancel the remaining projects, just put them in the pool, and then resurrect them when money appears to be there for us to do projects. We will be doing a park master plan update again this next fiscal year. It's budgeted for that. And that will essentially give us a chance to reset. And that will revisit programs and projects that we had in the original plan that may or may not be viable any longer or necessary. But we'll know when we get there. I've mentioned this in those meetings as well. We've got about a $2 million backlog of major repair or equipment replacement projects that we just simply can't tackle. We tackle the nickel and dime stuff. We nibble around the edges. Last year, we replaced about $75,000 or $100,000 worth of sidewalk in one park. We're probably adding at least $100,000 a year in terms of deferred maintenance to the park system. So we're searching diligently for different ways to fund that. But right now, the number keeps growing. And I think probably Dick Conley especially would be well aware of why it goes there. Current staffing levels, finally, are, in my estimation, inadequate to meet this community's needs. We are, I think, doing a very good job with the FTE and the resources that we have right now. I think we are a major player in this community and a positive influence in this community. That said, this community, as it grows, needs more, I think, in terms of services and activities that can be there for the needs of a growing community. I think that our property and our building maintenance activities, as I just mentioned with the backlog, will continue to be stretched and be more inadequate as time goes on unless we can figure out another way to do things. And with that, I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Rick?
I noticed that recently there was some money potentially coming in or going to be utilized by the department through the CBDG to help with some of the parks.
Yes.
Is there any, and that may occur ongoing as that program ramps up, et cetera. Is there any way to show some of that possibly in that it would then be kind of like, for lack of a better description, an offset to some of the needs? Say some of these are being covered by.
So the way, where that would show, Ray, is in the park master plan. The 2006 plan called for the replacement of playground equipment citywide, in particular Sunrise Park. Sunrise Park is one of the 2 projects that has been partially funded with CDBG funds, half of it. The other half is being funded through a transfer from Parks Administration into the Parks Capital Fund 1507.
That's what I was alluding to, was it you show that these are unfunded needs and things like that. I'm just wondering if it can be shown somehow that some of these are now nominally started to be covered through some of this other funding streams that are starting to come on strong.
As we identify funding, projects will come off that list, and there are two lists that we keep. Maybe there's a distinction that needs to be made. The big park master plan and capital projects list that we review every year, those are really big ticket items. Sunrise Park is included on that list. In fact, it was included in the CIP this year.
So potentially the CBDG kind of funds come in wouldn't be a meaningful number to reduce like your $2 million backlog?
No, in fact, we're not going to, well, first of all, the CDBG funds can only be spent in a fairly narrow, small area. And these two projects, the other project being replacement of portions of the Periwinkle Creek path, once those two projects are done, then I'm not sure what other projects might be eligible that we could put on the table. We just don't have that many park facilities in the
defined areas.
The areas. Yes, that's correct. But both of those projects were called for in the park master plan. The $2 million backlog tends to be stuff like replacing parts of existing irrigation systems, or replacing parts of sidewalks in parks, relatively small-scale projects. We've sort of chipped away at some of them when we had resources to move in that direction, and right now we're just simply not able to do that. Does that answer the question, Ray?
It does.
All right. Sorry.
Lloyd?
Yeah, I want to focus on River Rhythm for just a minute.
Sure.
About how many people attend that annually?
I think it was around 40,000, about 40,000 this past year.
And what does it cost us for the entire River Rhythm program?
River Rhythms is included in...
You want to use the mic, Katie? There's a mic back there.
River Rhythms is included in... Okay. River Rhythms is included in the performance budget. It's very difficult to break out because so many of the supplies and people that we use overlap throughout. We did a breakdown last year, and I believe that River Rhythms, if you pre-in-kind, and I can flip to that and see what the percent of cost...
Ballpark's fine,
Yeah.
Katie.
Let me flip to it, Lloyd, real quick. I believe that River Rhythms cost us approximately $400,000.
No, I don't think so.
300,000?
Katie, your entire budget for that is 548,000. We know that.
River Rhythms is about 35% of the entire budget, and it has a cost recovery through non-tax revenues of about 72%. Or 62% this past year. Usually it's about 72%. That does not count the in-kind resources that we get, which takes that up substantially more.
Well, I'm looking at the numbers, and if we got 40,000 people, we get 15,000 in donations by passing the bucket. And we get 60,000 because of our sponsorship. I've talked about this before. When people come and enjoy that venue, and we get $15,000 in passing the bucket for the quality of what's down there. I mean, that's pretty pathetic. And I know that the sponsors have voiced an opinion.
Some of them have.
Some of them have, that they don't want us to have an access fee. But at some point, when we're looking at general fund restrictions and reductions, if we charged $1 a head, we'd get a $40,000 increase.
And actually, I think that's a bit misleading, and there's a couple of reasons. One is we actually get more than $60,000 in sponsorships. We more than equal in-kind sponsorships, people that we can't provide we don't provide the garbage service comes in and does it, costs that are deferred. But beyond that, our prices would almost double if we were to go to a paid, because the rate we get is for a free concert. We have an issue, for example, in the Northwest Art and Air Festival with the donated spots. Performers look out at that and they say, that's a paid concert. We need to double the amount of the bill. The price that we pay per performers is based on it being a free concert, and so our costs go up substantially if we start to charge in any way, any sort of admission fee. It doesn't go up for staffing, it doesn't go up for signage, but performers is the major charge in those budgets, and we absolutely increase dramatically the amount of money that we have to pay for the performers based on whether or not the performance, they take a percentage of gate.
Yeah.
They take a percentage, based on what their ticket gate should be if you're charging.
So the bottom line
yeah.
is, you've identified a pet peeve of mine.
Right.
We've all thought the same thing, that we do wish that we could get more in contributions. And that we need to continue to call it a donation or a contribution. The question is, how can we get at a higher number in a different way than we are right now? And we continually think about that, Floyd, but we haven't come up with a magic formula.
So we have, what, 5 or 6 activities throughout the year for River Rhythms?
It's 5 concerts.
We have 5 concerts over a 6-week period, and then we co-sponsor with the fair the concert that they do.
So we're picking up $2,000 or $3,000 a week for those. And,
Yeah, that's probably about right.
And we get up to 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people down there.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, on average, I would say
Right.
somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000.
Yeah, and I just think that it's not very responsive of a community, and certainly if you take a look at who's attending those, a lot of them are from outside of this community. So people are taking major advantage of the back feeding from our general fund.
Right. If you've got any great ideas on how to encourage higher levels of donation, we'd love to hear them.
So
We'll put a toll booth on the bridges.
And I know, Floyd, as a Kiwanian, you've been down there and you've seen some of the moves we've made in the last 2 years to help to facilitate donations. If you've come in the last 2 years, you notice that you now walk through a structure and an entrance where there are people actually sitting there saying to you, wouldn't you like to make a donation, as opposed to just the passively passing the basket. So from the minute they enter the event, they're actually walking between 2 booths to get in, where we actually have people. We have, historically we've only done pass the basket at halftime. We've changed that. So we are looking at ways to at least bring to top of mind awareness that this does cost money. We've started to change every post we do when people say, what does it cost? We say, well, the cost is offset by your donations and sponsors' money, as opposed to it's free. So we've started to change our language to try to help to generate some additional awareness of the need to donate.
Thank you, Katie.
And what also River Rhythms and Northwest Arm Air Festival, for what we contribute to it is really sort of a marketing tool of our community. It puts us on the map. I mean, you would not believe the amount of out-of-town people that I hear from, that they relate to Albany as our music, our River Rhythms, our Northwest Art and Air Festival. So bringing people into the community that spend money in the community too when they're here. So it's a good economic driver. So.
And in fact, this year, as we've started to improve the quality of the events, we've actually gotten numerous calls this year about River Rhythms. We've always had that for Art and Air, but River Rhythms saying, what hotels can we stay in? We're coming from Edmonds, Washington. What hotels are available in the community, and we're getting quite a few of those now. Are there hotels in the downtown core? What's the closest hotel? And we haven't had that in the past with River Rhythms. They've always put money at the restaurants and at the gas stations, but it's now driving guests to the community that puts heads in beds. So.
Yeah, it does. Great event. Wonderful.
Ed, to just kind of follow up a little bit on some of your comments right at the end of your presentation about the city kind of being, behind as far as the services or the potential services that the city could offer through the Parks Department, and not having the funding to do some of those kinds of things.
That was my comment about inadequate staffing.
Yeah, okay. Inadequate staffing, and just and the sense that I got was that there were things that the Parks Department could do today that they can't because of staffing and funding, or even do in the future because of staffing and funding. So one creative idea of how you would get that funding? I mean, do you have, is that something that you've given any significant thought to?
Yeah, tons.
Okay.
But I haven't come up with, again, that magic bullet yet. I think where I was going with that comment, Jeff, just to put it in context, we get requests for different programs, different services, or sustaining or growing existing programs and services all the time. Even though we're delivering those with contractors and volunteers, not staff, it still takes staff to sort of coordinate and supervise those programs, and we have sort of maxed out with our existing staff in terms of the workload that they've got. So it would be really difficult to absorb additional programs without increasing staff, and we're just not in a position to do that at this point. And pretty much the same, it's a similar story with our maintenance folks. We've got a limited number of FTEs. That number hasn't changed. Since 2007, we've actually added 41%. We've grown the park system by 41% in terms of acreage, and we've seen a decrease in our staff. So it's stretching us to the max. Even though we've cashed in supervisors and managers and put people in the field, it's still the same number, or it's a fewer number of bodies. So that was my only point, that I don't see in the near term that we're going to be able to increase the level of services unless we see a staff increase, and that's not foreseeable at this point. I hope that's clear.
And then, not so much a question, but maybe just a comment, and this is directed towards council, I guess, more than yourself. We heard this evening that between the Art and Air Festival and River Rhythms, economic benefits, about $4 million coming into this community because of those events, and the amount of room tax money that goes to the parks is about $90,000. I would encourage the council to take another look at how that room tax money is distributed. When you have a department that's putting on events, bringing in $4 million into this community, $90,000 is really a small amount. And if I remember right, room tax money is $700,000, $800,000 in that range.
That sounds right, yeah.
So there appears to be room for more of that money to go into the Parks Department. And I would encourage the council to relook at how that entire amount is distributed and get more money to get into the Parks Department.
Floyd?
What's the current percentage of the total tax revenue you receive? At one time, when we went to a permanent tax rate, it was 24, 25%.
I think what I was told, Floyd, when I got here is that it used to be about 28%, and that was post measures 4750.
Right.
And then when I got here, it was 22%. It is now 20%. I don't remember, quite honestly, when that change occurred. I pitched it, so I don't. It's my fault, but I just don't remember.
So what that means is your percent, prior to 4750, you had levies out there that were operating.
That's correct. That's
and
correct.
the money went straight to the Park and Rec Fund. When 4750 materialized, we combined that into a combined tax rate, and for a couple of years at least, we operated on a percentage of the total revenue being what it would have been under the old scenario. Then over time, because
additional
of competing
pressures,
interest,
yeah.
and between general fund revenue requirements and Park and Rec revenue requirements, you've lost 8% of your gross income on a percentage basis.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Any more?
Thank you, Ed.
All right, thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Jorge Salinas, and I manage, excuse me, the IT department for the City of Albany. It's my pleasure to be here talking about the IT budget. And the information you might have there is a little bit probably different from what I'm presenting. I just put it in a slide format and probably added a couple more items. So what does the IT department do? If you ask me that question, is we're responsible for the technical leadership and delivery of IT and GIS services for the City of Albany. If you ask other people, they might say, it's just a black box. And what I'll try to do is take you inside that black box for a little while and open some little boxes and explains how this big black box works.
Seatbelt.
Some of the items or responsibilities that we have is we manage databases. We have about 190 production SQL databases in the city. We have voice or IP systems that we manage about 385 phones, 506 nodes for the phone system. We host a system for the library system, not only for the City of Albany, but for Lebanon, for LBCC, and now for Sweet Home. We're hosting that infrastructure for them and supporting them. Thanks to Ed that continues to conquer other nearby neighbors, we'll continue to improve and grow this library system. I call him Ed the Conquistador. We also have and manage a large network infrastructure for the city. We have about 90 business applications that we manage. We also provide GIS services to the entire city. We provide IT security and help desk services. In terms of infrastructure, we have about 98 production servers right now running on 4 physical host clusters. And we also, in terms of security, I just had David run a report for me. And for example, yesterday we had 42,000 denied access attempts from outside. There's people trying to come into our system, 42,000 just yesterday. We also do other things that are not normal in IT. We provide the police department, we provide support in terms of setting up cameras for covert video surveillance on their investigations. We go out, we look at the environment and set up cameras so they can record for some of the cases that they are working on. So we provide NATIA certified technical staff to do that. We go undercover as technicians of other services and put these equipment for police. We also manage the government access channel and also the AV room, which we have Michael Cox here every meeting that is recorded, every council meeting. He's here with you, and he manages and support this complete infrastructure for the government channel and the council AV recording and streaming services. We also provide facility video services for most of our facilities, including the train station, this building, and various buildings around the city. And we also are going to continue to do reporting services and business intelligence, which is some of the work that Bob Woods used to do. That responsibility has moved into the IT department as well. Another task or responsibility that we're taking on is managing the energy program for the city. We started doing that in October, and it's going to be a 2-year program where we're trying to look and address energy efficiencies throughout the city. We normally process about 5,000 calls a year. As of a couple weeks ago, looking back 10 months, we processed 4,500 calls. And out of those 4,500 calls, we managed or worked on 107 calls that were after hours. After hours means anything from outside the boundaries of 8 through 5, Monday through Friday. And the majority of the calls, as you can expect, will come from our customers, police, and fire. We have here that police provides about, or uses about 22% of our services in terms of help desk calls. Public Works 19% and fire 15%. So these 3 departments are probably provide or generate about 60% about usage of the IT services, as expected. Just wanted to provide also a quick snapshot of some of the things that we do in protecting the city in terms of email. We receive, as of a few weeks ago, almost 2 million emails that came into the city. About 1 million of those we had to block. They contain viruses or some kind of malware or were not real email. And out of those emails, there were about 2,100 viruses that were blocked that did not make it into the city. Wanted to talk a little bit about the projects that were done or currently can be completed during this fiscal year. One is the e-plans or project docs, which would enable our builders and developers to submit their plans electronically. Right now, in the building department or building division, anybody that is going to be submitting plans for a big development, they have to bring 5 copies of the different plans. Some of these might weigh 30 to 40 pounds, and they have to bring in a set of 5 every time they make a change. They will be able to submit these online and avoid bringing these upstairs and having the employees here manage this kind of load. Plus, it will provide some savings and improve efficiency in the process. We're also replacing the Acela automation system, which is the permit system, is about a 20-plus-year-old system that will come online in the next couple months. We just finished a large implementation of upgrading our systems in the city to 8.1, and that just concluded this past week. And we also moved all the mobile data terminals in the police vehicles and fire vehicles to Windows 7. One of the major reasons we had to do these 2 projects is that Windows XP is not supported in terms of providing patches from Microsoft. And here in the city, we have to adhere to HIPAA compliance and CGIS compliance. And by staying behind on these old systems, we will be out of compliance. So we are able to address those by upgrading these systems. Besides these major projects, we also did these other projects, which are part of some of the responsibilities we have. What we're planning for fiscal year 15 is we have a few projects that we have in store here. One that might be of interest to our city council is we're going to be working very closely with Linn County to upgrade the CAT RMS system, which is something that I heard when police was providing their report, that they had a very old system and they had to enter things multiple times. This is the project that will address that. We're currently in the completing the RFP process, and jointly with Linn County, we're going to be managing a project to replace the system. As soon as we know about how much that costs and what it would take, we will bring it to City Council for evaluation and approval. How we do it, we speak business and IT fluently. We are very close to our customer, the folks here in the city, the employees, and we try to work very hard to understand their processes and bring to them technology that would help make these processes more efficiently, and which will allow them to be able to render better services to the citizens of Albany. We have 9.5 FTEs in the 1031 program, which is IT services. We have 2.0 on the GIS services, which is 2010, and 0.5 FTE on the 2011, which is the permits program. We also have internal processes that we have to follow in IT in order to deliver these services, and we rely on technology to be able to deliver these services to our internal customers, which are all the departments in the city. Here's a snapshot of the past few years in terms of our budget. As you can see, the budget has remained pretty flat for the last 3 years. This year, it went up about $100,000 plus. We're having a transfer of an FTE from the city manager's office, which is Bob's position has transferred into the IT department. We took that position, reclassified down, and are going to be taking over some of those responsibilities. In terms of GIS, the budget has significantly reduced from what it was in fiscal year 2010. We now have 2 FTEs and a proposed budget of $422,000. In terms of permits, that budget is a small program budget, and the increase, the delta from the fiscal year 14 is that we allocated $31,500 to pay back the Excella project, which is a loan that we took from the bank of Mark Shepard to be able, and we need to pay that back with interest. So in order to make sure that we continue to have good credit with the bank of Mark Shepard, we're putting some money in here so we can pay back for the project, the Excella project. And we're going to be doing this, I think, for the next 4 or 5 years. So that's the difference between what a normal budget in this program looks like and what it's going to look like in the next 4 or 5 years.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah.
Back to the bank of Mark Shepard.
It's just another hat, you know?
Complex accounting maneuver.
So highlights from the FY15 proposed budget for the IT services. The difference or the delta from last year's proposed budget is about $112,000 or $14,000. $96,000 of that is going to be in terms. It was going to be for personnel services, and $13,400 is materials and services. In terms of materials and services, there's a $10,000 proposed item for adding for the IT equipment replacement. We have not been putting any money in IT equipment replacement, or very little. And since we're going to be working on some major infrastructure projects, we want to continue to maintain that that balance. So we're just proposing to put another $10,000. That's why the $13,000. In terms of GIS, it's pretty flat. Personal services is $7,000, and materials and service $14,000. Out of the $14,000, about $12,500 is money that we're putting into a reserve fund for the aerial project. We haven't done that in, I think, now 3 or 4 years in terms of flying over and getting new pictures and GIS information in our system. So we are putting another $12,500 from what we put last year. So the balance should be around $37,000 during this fiscal year. And then for the permits program, it's personnel services only $1,800 and $26,900. The combined, there was some reduction, but the combined change is that $31,000 that we borrow from Public Works for the solar project. Questions?
You mentioned the income coming from Lebanon and Sweet Home because of facilitating some of that process. Is there any way to show that on here so we can see how much we're actually getting from those communities?
Unfortunately, I don't get any of that. I know that Ed is getting some for the maintenance of the system, and we have been talking about how we can actually address some of the costs, because if they're using our infrastructure, they should be paying some percentage, and we're going to be working on that for the next year.
We don't have a formalized contract with them per se?
Ed has worked some kind of contract or some kind of agreement with them. I have not been part of it, but since they are using our infrastructure that has been paid by the citizen of Albany, we have to charge back some kind of cost for using our infrastructure, servers and stuff like that, and some of our support.
I mean, this is new to me, so and I think some of us, so it'd be nice to kind of maybe have a report on that in the future, and kind of an update and see what we are receiving, you know, in revenues to what it's actually costing us. So I'd like to have an update.
Okay. No questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Good evening, Budget Committee. The city manager said that he would let me kick off the city manager economic development city council portion of the budget. So we're going to do the economic development piece of this first, and I think he then will speak to the other portions. Also, as was the case with the ARA budget, in your budget binder, of course, you've got the specific budget items related to the economic development budget, and then I also included in your packet that sort of preemptive line-by-line breakdown to hopefully answer some of your questions ahead of time. But I'd like to go over things sort of generally here, but fairly quickly, as I know it's been a long evening, a long set of meetings. So quickly, to follow the same structure that you've been hearing about, we wanted to hit on what we do in economic development and how we do it. Like the CARA budget that you heard about, the economic development work for the city of Albany also follows the strategic plan, and we have 4 main goals. You've heard about goal 4 of that, which related to the CARA district, but we also work to attract and retain our local businesses, create stronger partnerships with folks in our community, and work on prosperity, living wage jobs, training, education for our area. And I think I mentioned it briefly in the other meeting, but this last year, as the new director for this department, I took a pretty long and hard look at the strategic plan and really tried to beef it up and increase how we were looking at our economic development activities, what we were doing, and what the goals would be this year. So quickly, some of our partners, they're varied, and I know you know who they are, but the counties, our surrounding cities, the COG, the Chamber, AMADEC, all of those folks are people that I work very closely with because a lot of this work relates to great communication, dialogue with our partners, being aware of opportunities, and working to eliminate barriers for the businesses in our community. Of course, too, this work involves working with our local businesses and, like I said before, cultivating relationships, focusing on job retention. A couple examples that are up here are folks that we've worked directly with. These were some examples of urban renewal partnerships, in fact, that we had helped to either get them over a hump, help them open in Albany, or help them expand their employee base here in Albany. The city attorney a while ago had also termed my position and maybe my style of working almost as an ombudsman for folks, and that is that I am here to help shepherd projects through the process. I am here to help eliminate barriers, and I have a great group of other directors of other departments that are also doing that great work, but at times it has been helpful for me to be separate from those departments and to sort of step in and help facilitate communication or meetings or whatever it's needed to get these projects going and on the ground. So this is just another sort of map and graphic of all these different partners that we're working with. Of course, in the city of Albany, it's my belief as well that economic development and community development are inexorably linked, that you sort of can't have one without the other. And in that work, our work there in the middle, we're then partnering with all these outside agencies to see this work happen. Now, one of the areas that I've really been able to step in and do a fair amount of work is sort of outreach in the community. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but working with our friends and partners at AMADEC and also the Chamber of Commerce. I'm involved in their workforce development task force or committee, and I also completed Leadership Albany this year, so really working to keep those relationships strong. Oh, true that. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, I would say state. The other one that I didn't put up there are a couple of other statewide is the Oregon Economic Development Association. I serve on their board, and I know you guys have heard me say before, but that I'm also president of the Oregon Association of redevelopment agencies. So some quick numbers. I had set some goals when I did the strategic plan of what the work was going to look like. I worked with the city manager on creating that work plan. But one of the first things I did stepping into the new role was what I termed listening tours, and that was going out and talking with business and community leaders to understand where they thought there were opportunities, where they thought there were challenges, how we could work together and be better partners. And in the 9 months or so that I've been in this role, I've conducted 35 of those meetings, and they have yielded some really helpful information, created great new relationships, and learning, I think both sides learning about what we do and then also what they do as well. I'm not going to go through these line by line, but some other examples of sort of the fruits of these labors are, you may have read in the paper, but we were able to procure a group of Oregon State master's students who are doing some really important work in our downtown in terms of a survey of existing merchants, survey of merchants who didn't choose downtown, as well as a better understanding of our vacant space, where that is, what that looks like. And of course, partnering with AMADEC on their strategic plan. We brought our strategic plan to the table, had them take a review, and then kind of working on how do we ensure that we're working collaboratively and that we're not either, one, stepping on toes, or worse, duplicating efforts. Nobody wants to see that happen. And of course, financing packages for our local industry partners. I had a slide, I pulled it out. I didn't want to be slide heavy tonight. I know it's sort of been a long night, but one of the things I wanted to mention is I have worked really hard to do more with less. I stepped into this role while still keeping all of my urban renewal work, and then stepped in to do the economic development work as well. This past year I've had 3 unpaid interns, so trying to get some special projects out the door and minimize costs. And I've also looked to try and partner with other departments to see if the potential existed to sort of contract out some of the work, and that hasn't come to fruition because, as you've been hearing, the other departments are pretty tied up with their own work and pretty stretched thin as well. So heading into the 14-15 budget, of course, the economic development budget was new to me, and so I wanted to take a moment for some of the board members that are new here to sort of walk you through how the transient lodging tax works, because that's fundamental to this budget. This budget is funded solely, it's funded by transient lodging tax and then the transfer in from CARA.
For what it's worth, there aren't any new ones here.
Oh, I guess that's true. All right, well then, we're moving on. No, I'll just hit it. I'll hit it very quickly, but thank you. That's a fair point. When the policy was set up by the City Council, there were 2 pieces to the transient lodging tax. One was for what was termed these existing programs, which were able to receive up to 3% a year increase if there were sufficient funds there. And then there were also what were termed to be new programs. And these programs basically had revenues distributed proportionately amongst them with whatever amounts were left over. Some examples, so here we're talking about the existing programs, the 4 quote-unquote existing programs, and in the budget you'll see those because they generally have a roughly 3% increase right next to them, are AMADEC here at 9%, Downtown Association at 9%, the airport, and then Albany Visitors here with the largest chunk of about 70%. The new programs, there's a handful of them. I included some photos just to sort of, so it wasn't just all wordy, but it's a number of items. Some of you heard from Parks Director Ed Hodney about Art and Air Festival, the transfer for that, the trolley, reimbursements out to Public Works and APD, AFD for their work on these programs. The Veterans Day Parade, I do want to call out quickly, is special in this group in that it is specifically limited to a flat allocation of $3,000 a year. So where in the budget you may have seen the others with increases next to them, this one stays flat because that's how the policy was written. Oh, well, see, I didn't, there you go.
Guess someday, unless the cost
Okay,
increase.
unless people start going to the bathroom more, apparently we're okay with that one remaining flat. This is just, again, a graph breakout, so you could sort of at a glance get a flavor. Sort of the biggies here are the collaborative tourism, the purple piece for AVA, the transfer out to fire and police, Northwest Art and Air, and then Main Street is red. So in terms of the proposed, quickly, like as I mentioned, the revenue coming into this fund comes from primarily transit room tax. There's also an interest line item. The other big piece, of course, is the transfer in from CARA, and we talked about that as part of the ARA budget. In terms of expenses, the categories for this are wages and salaries and administrative costs, which you're used to, and then the outflow to those existing quote-unquote and new programs, and then the reserve line item that was also part of that policy. So that's basically the makeup of this fund. We talked about it briefly on the night of the ARA meeting, so I'm not going to really go into detail here, but another sort of significant change in this budget was the proposal for the reinstatement of the Economic Development Officer role. And this is going back to the structure that was in place when I was hired, with an Economic Development Director in place, and then an Economic Development Officer role underneath, which is primarily funded through transfer in of funds from the Urban Renewal District. Again, the idea is that Urban Renewal will pay its own way related to staffing. I mentioned about, sort of ways that I've attempted to cover some of this work, but the way it's outlined in the strategic plan, the way the revenue has been growing since I started here in terms of the scope of the Urban Renewal District is really at a point where this added position is needed and warranted. And I did want to outline, too, that, of course, adding this position into this fund, the way it's structured, does not affect the general fund, because this is paid primarily through the Urban Renewal District and then through the transient lodging tax. So that's the overarching summary. I've got the line items here. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and then once you're done with me, we can turn it over to the city manager.
Bessie?
Yeah, Kate, on page 313, and you had mentioned it, the Veterans Day Parade. I noticed that has stayed $3,000 for years. And I just wondered, do they request it, or do we just offer it? And I'm wondering their costs have got to be going up too. And I'm just wondering if our contribution or transfer to them should be increased, just like the other, outside agencies and MNDEC, AVA, ADA and stuff, And I just wondered, I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I saw that and I thought, that's really something that because that's something that is, Albany is known for that parade. And it is so good, and I just want to make sure that we keep it going on and that we do our fair share. So,
in frequent contact with Patty, Louisiana, on it. And when we originally did the 3,000 years back, is when it switched to the Lynn County Veterans Commemoration that took over the parade, they needed the funds for the portable, and they had hardly any sort of contributions for the parade back then. Now they're coming out very well with the contribution. She's been able to balance the budget well. So I would probably, if they ended up needing more funds, getting it up for them.
Because I just think since everything else is increasing, we don't want to just give money away, but I still feel that is something that is very important to Albany.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If portable restroom costs end up costing more, I would imagine we'll probably be hearing from them.
Maybe we'll get that discount they were talking about.
I think it's a great event too. There are other things that the city does to support it. There's the police officers on bicycle patrol, probably other things that I'm not aware of. Rich?
I would join Jeff in recommendation that this the TLT be re-examined. As you may be aware, the hotelers, the people who collect the tax, are unhappy with a capital U. Now, it's been said that there's all fixed, and it's not even close to all fixed. With the exception of Albany Parks, they sing praises about Albany Parks, but they point to other things that money is spent for. And from the perspective of someone trying to get people to do something, we're taking money out of a pot and there's not very much to put money back in it. From a marketing perspective, you're foolish if you do not make sure that the pot that you're taking stuff out of does not get refilled. Their numbers are down by 15%, and they're headed further down. They have issues with the way some of the money is spent, and that is because if I would do the same thing at my store, I would instead of saying that I can sell the most efficient welding machines at the best, yada yada, and then sell all these other things along with it, I point out that you can get an apple on the way in, and oh, by the way, I sell welding machines. One, you get people who are looking for apples, and the other, you get people who are looking for welding machines, and then I get to sell them all kinds of stuff along with it. Much of the same thing, in their view, is happening by having a nosh tour, my lady went to Talking Water Gardens on a tour, and they spent nothing in Albany. Now, that may or may not be indicative, but I think it asks enough question that we need to re-examine how this is done and refocus on making sure that we put heads in bed so we get money back to pay for everything. Because now it's, according to them, spiraling down, and they've shown me some information that, at least proves a piece of it. I'm not a motel, hotel marketing guy, but I can read, and when it is going down dramatically, it's going down dramatically, so.
And I think if I could say from a staff perspective, this is very much so a policy-driven budget. The budget is built based on policy that's in place from the city council. So, it would seem to me if you have a group of councilors that want to re-examine this policy, that's your decision, and then this budget is built directly from the policy that there's 4 votes for.
Pauline, did you still?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had a question on the transit room tax, which is a large portion of your budget. Does that rate stay the same, or does it go up periodically?
Yeah, it has not increased.
It stays the same.
But yeah, it's been flat for a while.
I see. So you're expecting more people to stay in Albany, is what you're doing?
Yes, and our esteemed finance director does the estimates on the income for the transit room tax based on
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Bill?
So I'll jump on the same bandwagon with Rich and Jeff that I do think it's time to revisit this. Now, this really isn't an issue for tonight. I have no problem with the budget as presented, and my concerns would not cause me to vote against the budget. But I did vote against the resolution 2 or 3 years ago and had some concerns back then on how it was structured and the 3% increase and so forth and so on. There are now even more problems with it, in my opinion. So it is timely to do that, and I think at the next council session we need to work with staff to get that on a work session agenda. On this single page double-sided that was on the dais tonight.
Yes.
This paragraph, the 40105 transit room tax estimates are provided by Finance Director Stuart Taylor. Growth estimated 6.47%, derived from the estimate, blah, blah, blah. In the work session a couple weeks ago that Rich mentioned, where the people came in representing the motel industry, what they said is that the room sales are down And the only reason we're seeing an increase in the TLT is because they have raised their rates. So I think that it's false economy to think that we're going to see some growth in this area. It's like Rich says, the room use is going down. And I think that this is just partial, blip increase, and little air comes out of the balloon, and you're going to see a decrease in this revenue. So just, a word of caution moving forward. We'll see how this plays out, but.
Building on Bill's point, there's two numbers I'd like to see when that happens, is what's the total number of night stays, and what's the total number of night stays that's directly associated with the Fair and Expo Center. Because the comment I heard was the percentage relating to the heads and the beds that are generated by the Fair and Expo are going down. Well, that could be because the others are going up, so their proportional share of the total could be going down. I don't think we have sufficient data, nor do I know that we collect that data, but we need to be asking people to supply it. Now I see on a monthly basis, we track the total revenue, but I think we need to be asking them to give us the total number of night stays and the total number of night stays associated with certain activities.
Sure. And I guess I would say, as staff, I'm happy to help facilitate the conversation and gather whatever data would be helpful for you as the council to review or do whatever it is.
Well, and as I say, this isn't the time or place, but
sure.
We need to have this discussion in the near future and give staff some direction so you can work on getting that information.
Sure.
The STAR report shows clearly numbers of people down throughout the entire, every one of the 10 or 11. It doesn't list each one of them, but it is the average. The number of people are down, and now they're saying their dollar volume is also going down, which is going to, then the TRT will go down.
Well, and to Stuart's point, at least for the budget planning, as we're talking about this fund that's before you tonight, at least in its current form, there is a contingency built in, again, which was a requirement of the policy. So in terms of thinking about this year at least, that's a built-in requirement, and it's there, and I'm happy to help in your guys' policy and decision-making as we go forward, however I can.
Well, and let me clarify, I'm not faulting Stuart for this, because, and I apologize.
The numbers you got.
I apologize if it came across that way, because when you look at the TLT report, you could only come to that conclusion. Hey, things are going up. It wasn't until the folks came in a couple of weeks ago and said they're going up because we've raised our rates, because our occupancy is down, and we got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd come to the same conclusion Stuart did.
Sure. Sharon, sure.
So, if there's going to be any sort of looking at the program and how we're going to be allocating the TLT funds, you might want to look at before you fill that position. Because looking at this is you're running off of some of the beginning balance, which is TLT funds. So we need to see if this is going to be sustainable then with the staffing levels by not dipping into the TLT funds. So I think we might need to kind of maybe look at this. The 100,000 reserve, that's pretty much been a carryover though, because that's not coming out new off the top. We put the 100,000 in the reserve several years ago.
Sure.
When we established the program. So, but I think we need to kind of make sure there's going to be the funds for this position.
And so
the council's wanting to open the door up with looking at TLT funds.
So what exactly can I bring back for you? I guess it's a little, we've got a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario too, with the question of opening. If the question is there to open it up and really look into the outflow of the TLT, and then with this new position. And
I mean, because am I incorrect here? I mean, Stuart probably knows if you're using beginning balance to balance this.
This whole thing was put together in the first place. Yeah, the beginning balance in this fund, similar to other funds, is a current revenue in the proposed budget. So that, together with the other revenues, is offset to balance against the expenditures, yeah.
Came from TLT funds
Well, the revenues didn't change from last year, the revenue sources. So it also included some CARA money as a revenue and interest money as a revenue in last year's budget. That would be a mix of that that's carried forward. That's correct.
And again, I think I would reiterate, too, what's being proposed here is exactly the structure that was in place when Dick Ebert was director and I was brought on as urban renewal coordinator. So we're merely replicating a structure that was in place.
No, he was not solely off of TLT. He didn't have a
Okay.
position. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Katie. Wes, are you coming up? Okay. We have about 15 more minutes this evening. But I've got at least 5 minutes of questions for you.
Go ahead.
Our budgets are so small that they don't even warrant a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll move first of all to the budget for the code enforcement. And this budget is a little deceptive because it clearly does not cover all our code enforcement activities. It just covers some very specific things that we do in regard to code enforcement, and I think it's sort of a legacy of a time past when we were trying to track mainly a program cost associated with the big pickup, which we do every year. And so really, the costs, as you can see, are primarily for that activity. We also do have some money. The next largest expense is we contract with the building department. We can't use building inspection fee funds in order to pay for things that are not related to actual code enforcement. So, and there's really not a huge change in this budget other than the decline in the central service charges, but I think it's fairly self-explanatory. So I will move to the council and non-departmental budgets, and again, this is a very straightforward budget. If you look at it, it's really maybe 3 line items, 2 or 3 line items of any real size. One, of course, is the very extravagant salaries and benefits that we pay to the city council. And then the other is space rental, which is just an allocated amount, and as you can see, there was a significant decline this year, and it's just an amount that's allocated primarily for this room and maybe some of the office space that supports the council. Memberships and dues, we have several, but there's 2 big ones that get covered in this line item. One is our annual dues to the League of Oregon Cities, and the other is dues to the Cascades West Council of Governments. And we get a fair amount of value for these investments. We get connected to statewide information sources that help us in terms of coping with new legislation that's constantly coming down the line. We also get involved in regional activities. I think the COG has really made the transition to a metropolitan planning organization, for example, very smooth. Without them, I think we'd have been floundering, and they've also connected us, again, to some statewide resources there. So I don't think there's anything there that represents much of a change. I'd be glad to answer any questions on that budget if you have them. This is...
Well, it's not related to the dollars, but I think it'd be nice in the near future to invite the new director of COG to come and introduce himself to the council.
Oh, he's already going to be planned on coming.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, he has certainly, I know the mayor's had a lot of contact serving on their board. I've had some conversations with him. I think he's seems like a very good person, good professional, a lot of great experience. So.
I'm just wondering, Wes, do you know, and I'm not advocating for it right now, but do you know the last time that the council stipend had an increase?
It hasn't happened during, well, we have given...
Other than the computer one.
Right, we did provide some resources to cover the costs of internet connections for council members, because we wanted to make sure, I mean, that's such an important communication tool. We wanted, and not everybody had it back when. But other than that, I have no idea. It hasn't happened in my 9 years here.
Yeah.
So,
I was just, you know, I know we don't do it for the money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Because we've talked about it multiple years. I thought for sure 1 year it changed, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just when it added internet, but actually because of state ethics rules now, it makes it difficult, isn't it, for voting?
Well, no. In theory, you know, you could choose to set your salary. I mean, you have that authority to be able to set the salary for, or the compensation for city council members. And no, there's really not any statutory limitation on that. The greater limitation is, you know, what the voters would think. What a lot of city councils do when they look to change this, at least I've seen this in the past, is they'll maybe set up a commission with the eye toward whatever change being implemented after, you know, an election or something, so that people, it isn't perceived that people are trying to feather their own nest.
$140.
I'm thinking there was something that if you voted, it was going to be a conflict of interest, sort of. If
No.
it had to be outgoing,
Then the governor?
you know, councilors to vote on it or something.
No, I wouldn't think so.
But that would be included if it was the governor or the House of Representatives or the Senate.
Yeah.
It would be the
No.
same problem for them.
No, I think you have the authority to set your salaries.
I guess I've always wondered, what it seems to be, what the salary seems to be, is kind of something for the expenses that we incur driving back and forth and for, you know, internet and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if in fact that is it, why are we paying taxes on it?
Well, actually, that's not it. You are also eligible to receive reimbursement for expenses. Most of you choose not to submit for that. So if you did submit, you wouldn't be paying taxes, is the short answer. The stipend is, you know, it's for attending meetings, it's, you know, for
It's
the,
minimum wage.
no, it's not.
Hey, that's during the meeting. That's not doing all the reading.
I was going to say, no, I don't.
For
I
what
don't-
country?
Yeah.
Hey,
That's it, nothing's
Yeah, I don't.
And years ago, before I was on council, we had the same discussion, and I made a motion that we double the salaries. And boy, the room got real quiet. I didn't even get a second. All the counselors at that time were looking at the ground.
It has been my experience that it's a difficult step for most councils to take because they feel like people will judge them for that. I mean, I think a lot of people believe, to be honest, I think a lot of people believe that you're receiving salaries.
Yes, and that was going to be my point.
But yet it's amazing how critical they will be when they find out you want to actually receive, you know, something that might be considered more appropriate for what you're doing.
Well, there must have been a raise someplace, because back in the good old days, it was $30 a month. Of course, in those days, $1 bought a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, yeah,
than it does
and yeah, we haven't done much in the way, there's been no inflation adjustment or COLAs. I mean, you know, that would be another option for the council to consider, is you could build in an inflation adjustment for councilor salaries, which, you know, has never been done, or tie it to union contracts. There's a lot of ways that a council might choose to see the compensation increase, but that's it's strictly your call.
that's a rough call, because, you know, if you want me to work for that kind of money, there was a pride thing that says, you want me to work for $1 what? No, I don't want to do that. I'll give it to you, you know.
Yeah. No, I understand. It's
That's all you think I'm worth? Well, no, let's not do it. you know.
yeah.
On the other hand, we all knew that when we signed up to run.
That's true.
Oh, exactly.
I mean,
No,
it's-
and I just want to throw it out there, and I know we're not going to finish tonight, and so just want people to
But we
think
couldn't
about
anyway.
it.
This is not a council meeting.
No, I mean.
You could recommend.
Is referring to the
You could
budget.
change the budget or recommend a
Exactly,
change to
yeah.
the budget.
And so I just want people to think about it and whatever, I'm not saying that we go do like what that town in California does, where they.
Did.
They're bankrupt.
Well, no, the town in California that had the scandal involving city councilor and city manager salaries, the city manager, I believe, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and...
Bell, California?
Yeah, so there's I'd rather that not happen here. I don't think there's much danger.
We're not talking about you, yeah. But anyway, just, if people would just think about it, and then maybe we can address it later.
Okay.
All
Duly
right, thank
noted.
you.
So my question for you, Wes, kind of relates to economic development, just in terms of the Pepsi settlement. It's hard for the lay members to keep up with all this, and so much happens throughout the year, but I thought, so initially, was it 18?
18.5 million was deposited.
And I remember it was going to be used for certain purposes, I think council directed. Economic development was one, I don't know how it was played out. But I can see on page 386, under the risk management fund, that there's 9.5 million. And I was thinking at one of our meetings this year, somebody asked for a breakout of how the Pepsi funds had been spent so far.
Yeah. And Stuart, and in fact, Stuart just had handed out, or just gave that to someone who had, the newspaper actually made that same request.
Okay.
And so he's now got it, it's part of his life.
So maybe when we get to finance, we could talk about that there? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's no more questions on the city council budget, we can move to the city manager's office. I would like to leave it with the fact that there's been an 18% or nearly a 19% reduction in personnel costs, which shows just how efficient we are, but Jorge already kind of ratted me out by indicating that he had assumed some of those costs. We recognize that Bob had a very unique set of skills and was doing some really valuable work for us. We didn't think we could replace him and have that same level of performance from that position, so we changed the nature of the position, reduced its cost somewhat, and took it out of our budget and put it into IT. And I would add, I'd like to give some thanks to Jorge for taking on some additional responsibilities this year in terms of energy, this position, and some other things that he's been doing. He's just done a super job without complaint. Another person who has done a super job in picking up responsibilities is Mark Shepard. We've joked about him being our banker, and he's also our community development director, and of course he's our public works director. And one of the things that is included in this year's budget is a proposal to change Mark's title from just public works / community development director to
Superman.
Well, close. Assistant city manager. And part of the reason for that is to recognize that he's really doing more than just, what a traditional department director does. He's had to take on a lot of responsibilities. I think his combined departments now are getting up close to like 140, 150 employees, and I think Mark has, with over 20 years with the organization and these increased responsibilities, that it's an appropriate recognition of what he's actually doing for the organization. I'm not planning to change reporting assignments. I think we have great relationships right now among our directors, and I don't see any need. I don't feel, right now we have the directors, in my view, require so little supervision from me that there's no need to change who they report to. So I suspect that will stay in place for a period of time where they will continue to be my direct reports. But that is a change in how we've done business in the city. We're probably the only city that I can think of our size that has not had this position for as long as we've had it. So I think it's appropriate, just given the nature of the organization right now. And
So besides the title, is there a budget dollar impact?
it is, it would
The
appear.
only reason I ask is because the Public Works Director salary range, maximum is only a couple hundred off from the city manager.
Well, yeah, actually, I think the salary, in terms of just salary, I think Mark actually gets more than I do. But I receive some of my salary, and this was negotiated when I first started with the city, was coming in the form of deferred compensation. And so the gap is not all that great, but that's not uncommon. We have positions, fire department is one that comes to mind. I think John was the second highest paid person in the fire department because battalion chiefs, some of whom have been with the city for a very long time, are eligible for overtime, and whereas John is salaried. So we had one last year who I think actually made slightly more than John did. So one of the things that we will be doing, and David may want to talk about this, I've asked him to do, is to look at our executive compensation plan. And we sort of compress things here in recent times by trying to hold back personnel costs, which are, that's the driver of our budgets. Yeah, I mean, when you look at, and John, you saw it tonight when John presented his budget, you saw a 3% overall increase in his budget, but yet no increase in, I mean, not only not an increase in services, but actually somewhat of a decrease in the services, even with a modest increase in the amount of money being made available. So yeah, it's an ongoing challenge of trying to fairly compensate people, and recognizing that you've got a lot of influences that are difficult for us to control in the form of binding arbitration and union negotiations and so on. But anyway, that's one of the significant changes in the overall budget this year.
Wes, would you take just a moment and explain that? I think we all probably pretty well understand it, but I'm not sure the general public does, about the binding arbitration, particularly for public safety.
Sure. We have three unions in the city, three bargaining units in the city that are strike prohibited by law. It is illegal, unlawful for members of our fire department, police department, and transit to strike, to go on strike. And so what the solution to that issue is from the legislature, and this has been in place for probably 40 years now, I think, or longer, is that if management and the bargaining unit cannot agree on salary and benefits, that each side prepares an offer, what they call a last best offer, and that goes to an arbitrator who then decides between the two positions, the position of the bargaining unit and the position of the city. And there is an incentive, to try and make you want to make your position reasonable, because you know that if it's completely unreasonable, that the arbitrator will decide for the other party. But there's also, it also is a system that continually ratchets upwards, because in the statute it gives guidance to the arbitrators about the factors that they can consider. And one is comparability, and you get into arguments and fights over what your comparables are, who you really compare to. But again, it's the way the system has functioned, and I don't believe I'm misstating this, is that it tends to drive your costs upward. There's a steady upward pressure on pay and benefits, and so that's what binding arbitration really boils down to.
And one of the points is that the arbitrator chooses one or the other. They do not have the freedom to equally divide.
Right, and I actually think that has been an improvement in the law, because when they could split the baby, that would tend to push things up even higher, because you didn't have as much of an incentive to be reasonable in your position. They could pick and choose, and so really I think the last best offer system represents an improvement. You know, if you really want to talk to an authority on this subject and somebody who's been immersed in it for his entire career, that would be David, because he's been through it all, and he does most of our negotiations. I'm a dilettante. I get called in to, you know, occasionally, and of course I whine usually to David about the way things are going, but that's roughly how the system works.
Don't scream and yell?
Try not to.
Well, I mean, that's the other half of whine.
It's a frustrating process sometimes. You know, on the other hand, it is a process that has been more or less made to work, and you know, so I don't go any farther than that, I guess, to editorialize. Okay. Just in looking at the city manager's office in terms of some items that have gone up a bit, and you might be. We did bump up our education and training budget. This mainly reflects the fact that we have an employee who, under our labor agreements, we do provide assistance for employees to further their education. And we have an employee who is working on their bachelor's degree in our office, and so that represents an additional expense there. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's more than what we have paid in the past. And then meetings and conferences, again, we added in another employee's trip to a national conference, and those tend to be a little spendy, but not, again, it's a big percentage, but not a large amount in terms of actual dollars. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions about that budget.
I just wondered, and I know he's worth every penny we pay him, but just wondered what is the mark you use or whatever for the city attorney? I mean, does he get like what the other employees get, or is it a certain?
He tries to. Jim has been, I think, remarkable in terms of holding his costs down. I really think that we get, in looking at what other cities pay for legal services, we get a lot for what we pay. And he has, during difficult economic times, he has done a lot what a lot of us have done. There are years where he's received no increase. This year, I think it was 2.79 was the increase, which I think he was trying to sort of stay in line with increases that unrepresented employees were getting.
That's why I just wondered if there was any kind of a base that you use, or,
I mean, it's what we sort of agree on, and Jim has, again, he's always been very reasonable in terms of his requests.
And then he does things like do things pro bono, which he's doing right now. So yeah.
Well, not only that, but now he's got an assistant in Sean, who so we've got two people working.
Yeah, and bear in mind too that Jim does. It is a practice. I mean, or a law practice, and they do have other clients. And in fact, they recently took on the city of Adair Village. So he's made jokes that he should be paid a substantial amount more because he has to work with two hairs instead of just one. But.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Wes.
Yeah.
So next week we'll get back to Human Resources and Finance. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to let Stuart and David know that they want to hear about next week?
Those are the final two presentations, right?
Yeah, those are the final two. Okay, any other? It's Thursday, May 29th. So if there's no other business, then I'll say this meeting is continued to May 29th, 2014.